Rain slapped my face as my aunt hurled my suitcase into the mud. "Get out, Emily! You're a parasite!" she spat, her diamond bracelet catching the porch light. I was still clutching Grandma's rosary when the front door slammed in my face. My voice cracked. "You promised— I promised nothing!" she shouted from behind the door. And just like that, the woman I'd cared for through 2 years of sickness erased me from her life. The betrayal burned through my chest like acid. I stood there in the storm, water soaking through my clothes, staring at the door that wouldn't open again. My suitcase lay open in the puddle, Grandma's photo albums getting ruined. Everything I owned was getting destroyed, and Aunt Marianne didn't care. She'd gotten what she wanted, or so she thought. I picked up my belongings with shaking hands, stuffing wet clothes back into the case. Thunder rolled overhead. I had nowhere to go, no money, and no family left who cared. But I had something she didn't know about, something Grandma made sure I'd have when this moment came. Because Grandma knew, she'd always known what kind of person her daughter really was. My name is Emily Watkins, and 2 hours before that storm, I still believed in family. I'd been living in that house for nearly 3 years, cooking for Grandma, bathing her, changing her sheets when she couldn't move. I missed my first year of college to take care of her while Aunt Marianne handled the finances. Or so she said. Grandma had gotten sick when I was 17. Mum died when I was 12, and Grandma was all I had left. Marianne swooped in during those early hospital visits, all concern and promises. "Don't worry, Emily, I'll make sure everything's taken care of. You just focus on school." But school became impossible when Grandma needed round-the-clock care. The nursing homes cost too much. Marianne said she couldn't afford it, but she somehow afforded a new Mercedes that year. So I stayed. I fed Grandma soup when her hands shook too much to hold the spoon. I read her favourite books aloud when her eyes got too weak. I held her hand through the pain. And Marianne? She visited twice a month, stayed for an hour, and left reminding me how grateful I should be for her generosity in letting me live there, rent-free. It started the week before Grandma passed. Marianne was whispering in the kitchen while I helped Grandma to the bathroom. "The lake house will be mine, right? She's not changing that stupid clause." I froze outside the doorway, Grandma leaning heavily on my arm. "Clause? What clause?" Grandma squeezed my hand, her papery skin warm against mine. She looked at me with those sharp blue eyes that hadn't dimmed despite everything else failing. She knew I'd heard. Later that night, after Marianne left and Grandma was settled in bed, I asked her about it. "Grandma, what lake house? What was Marianne talking about?" She patted the bed beside her. Her voice was tired but clear. "Baby girl, there are things you need to know, things I should have told you sooner." She explained that she owned a lake house in northern Michigan, bought decades ago when property was cheap. It was worth over $400,000 now. And according to her will, it was mine. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because Marianne would have made your life hell if she knew," Grandma said. "And I wanted these last years with you to be peaceful." At Grandma's funeral, Marianne cried, just enough for the camera phones. Her husband, Uncle Frank, avoided my eyes completely. He'd always been kind to me, but he was weak. Whatever Marianne wanted, Marianne got. When I tried to hand her the will envelope Grandma gave me 3 days before she died, Marianne slid it into her designer purse without looking at it. "You don't need to trouble yourself with legal matters, sweetie," she said, patting my shoulder. "I'll handle everything. You just focus on grieving." Her smile was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. Everything about her was a performance. People hugged me, told me how sorry they were. How lucky I was to have family like Marianne to take care of me now. I nodded and thanked them, clutching the second envelope Grandma had hidden in her nightstand, the one Marianne didn't know about. Inside was a business card for Thomas Bradley, attorney at law. On the back, in Grandma's shaky handwriting, "When she shows her true colours, call him. He knows everything." I kept that card in my pocket, my fingers touching it like a talisman. 3 days. Grandma said it would take 3 days for Marianne to reveal herself. 3 days later, she told me, "You have until tonight to pack up." I blinked, standing in the kitchen where I'd made Grandma breakfast every morning for 3 years. What, Grandma wanted me here until... Her voice sharpened like a knife. Until what? Until you freeloaded forever? You think you're entitled to anything? You're lucky I fed you this long. My stomach dropped. I took care of her. I gave up everything. You gave up nothing, Marianne snapped. You had nowhere else to go. This was charity, Emily. And charity has limits. Uncle Frank stood behind her, looking at the floor. Coward. I wanted to scream at him, to ask how he could let this happen, but I already knew the answer. I need more time, I said quietly. The funeral was 3 days ago. I haven't even... Not my problem. Pack your things and leave your key on the counter. She checked her watch. Frank and I have dinner reservations at 8. I want you gone before we get back. That night, I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot. My phone battery died around midnight. The temperature dropped to 40 degrees, and I cried until there were no tears left. I went to the courthouse the next morning, clutching Thomas Bradley's card in my hand. The receptionist directed me to the 3rd floor. Mr. Bradley was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when I entered. Emily Watkins. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. He gestured to a chair. Your grandmother told me you'd come. I'm so sorry for your loss. She was a remarkable woman. He pulled up a file on his computer. His expression shifted as he read. According to your grandmother's will, which was updated 6 months ago, you are the sole beneficiary of the Lake House property on Clearwater Drive. My heart stopped. But Marianne said... What did Marianne say? His tone sharpened. I explained everything. The eviction, the dismissal, the way she'd taken the will envelope and told me not to worry about legal matters. Mr. Bradley's jaw tightened. He typed something, then his screen refreshed. His face went pale. Miss Watkins, I need to show you something. He turned the monitor toward me. There was a property deed transfer application filed 4 days ago, 2 days before Grandma's funeral. The signature at the bottom said Helen Watkins. But it wasn't Grandma's signature. I knew that handwriting better than my own. She forged it, I whispered. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. The signature was close, but the loop on the W was wrong. Too round. Grandma always made hers with a sharp angle at the bottom. Mr. Bradley pulled out a folder. Inside were documents, all with Grandma's real signature. The difference was obvious once you looked. This is fraud, he said quietly, but she's already filed the deed transfer with the county. If we don't act fast, the property will legally become hers in 30 days. 30 days. 1 month to prove that my aunt had forged my dead grandmother's signature and stolen my inheritance. What do I do? I asked. He leaned back in his chair. We fight, but I need you to understand something, Emily. This won't be easy. Marianne has money, connections, and a lawyer who's very good at making problems disappear. What do you need from me? Evidence. Anything that proves this signature is false. Anything that shows her intent to defraud. Do you have access to any of your grandmother's papers? I thought about the nightstand, the false bottom I discovered years ago when Grandma asked me to hide her jewellery from home health aides she didn't trust. Maybe, I said. But I can't get back into the house. I didn't confront her. Instead, I texted, "Thank you for everything. I'm sorry I was a burden. I hope we can talk soon." She responded in minutes. "Of course, sweetie. You'll always be family." The lie was so smooth it could have been true. I got a room above a laundromat on the east side of the town, $70 a week paid in cash. The room was tiny, the walls were thin, and the smell of detergent seeped through the floorboards. But it was mine. I started working at Rosie's Diner 2 blocks away, breakfast and lunch shift, 6 days a week. The tips were terrible, but the owner, Rosie, paid me under the table and didn't ask questions when I showed up with everything I owned in a garbage bag. At night, I planned. Mr. Bradley said we needed evidence, so I made a list of everything I knew. Grandma's nightstand had a false bottom. Inside were letters, receipts, old photos. Maybe something that proved the forgery. But getting into that house meant facing Marianne, or outsmarting her. I chose the latter. During my shift, I started asking questions. The regulars loved to gossip, and Marianne's name came up often. She was on the hospital board, the country club committee, and the Arts Foundation. Everyone knew her. Most people liked her. None of them knew the truth. Grandma's nightstand had a false bottom compartment. I'd found it by accident 5 years ago when I knocked over a lamp and the drawer fell out. Inside the hidden space, Grandma kept important things. Cash for emergencies, her mother's wedding ring, and a leather journal I'd never been allowed to read. "When you're older," she'd always said. Now I needed whatever was in that journal. The problem was simple. The house was locked, and Marianne had changed the security code. But I knew something she didn't. The basement window latch had been broken for 2 years. Grandma kept asking Uncle Frank to fix it, and he kept forgetting. I waited until Thursday afternoon when Marianne had her standing appointment at the salon. 3 hours every week, like clockwork. The house sat on 2 acres surrounded by trees. No neighbours close enough to see. I parked 3 blocks away and walked through the woods behind the property. The basement windows slid open easily. I dropped into the darkness, my phone flashlight cutting through the dust. Everything looked the same. Grandma's chair still sat by the window. Her knitting basket was on the side table. Marianne hadn't changed anything yet. She was probably waiting until the deed transfer went through, until she could legally sell it all and pocket the money. I crept upstairs, every creak of the floorboards making my heart race. Grandma's room smelled like lavender and sadness. I went straight to the nightstand, pulled out the drawer, and pressed the hidden release. The false bottom popped open. Inside was the journal, a stack of letters bound with ribbon, and a manila envelope labelled Marianne's debts. My breath caught. I grabbed everything and stuffed it into my backpack, but then I heard the front door open. "Frank, check the alarm. I swear I reset it this morning." Marianne's voice echoed up the stairs. Panic flooded my veins. I wasn't supposed to be here for another hour. She'd changed her appointment. I shoved the drawer closed and looked for an escape route. The window was too high. The closet was too obvious. I slid under the bed, pressing myself flat against the dusty floorboards. Footsteps climbed the stairs. Marianne entered the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood. She moved around, opening drawers, muttering about something. Then her phone rang. What? No, I specifically said the appraisal needed to be done before the end of the month. If that property isn't transferred by then, we lose the buyer. My blood turned to ice. She was already selling the lake house, before the 30 days were even up. I barely breathed as Marianne paced the room. "I don't care what the county says, that deed transfer is legitimate. I have her signature right here," or a pause. "No, the girl doesn't know anything. I made sure of that." Another pause, longer this time. "Look, Helen was senile at the end. If anyone asks, she signed everything before she died. Emily was too busy playing nurse to notice." My hands curled into fists. I wanted to crawl out from under that bed and scream the truth in her face. But I stayed silent. She finally left, her heels clicking down the stairs. I waited 5 full minutes before moving. When I crawled out, my whole body ached. I climbed out the basement window and ran through the woods like something was chasing me. Back in my room above the laundromat, I opened the journal. Grandma's handwriting filled every page. Dates, conversations, loans Marianne had asked for over the years. $50,000 in 2015. $30,000 in 2017. $20,000 in 2019. All marked never repaid. The manila envelope contained even more. Bank statements showing transfers from Grandma's account to Marianne's. Letters from debt collectors addressed to Marianne but sent to Grandma's house. proof that Marianne had been using Grandma as a personal ATM for decades. And at the bottom of the envelope, a handwritten note. Emily, if you're reading this, she's done something terrible. Use this to protect yourself. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better. I spent the next week building my case. Every night after my shift, I sat at the tiny desk in my room and organised the evidence. I made copies of everything at the library. 3 sets. 1 for me, 1 for Mr. Bradley, 1 hidden at the diner in case Marianne found out what I was doing. The journal was damning. Grandma had documented every lie, every manipulative conversation, every time Marianne promised to pay her back, and never did. On page 47, dated 3 months before Grandma died. Marianne asked about my will today. She was so casual about it, but I saw the calculation in her eyes. She thinks she's getting the lake house. She thinks Emily doesn't know. But I've made sure Emily is protected. If Marianne tries anything, Emily will have the proof she needs. My grandmother had known. She'd spent her final months preparing for this exact moment. The receipts were even more interesting. Marianne had hired a notary named Patricia Holmes 3 times in the past year. All 3 visits happened on days when I'd taken Grandma to doctor appointments. The timestamps were in the journal. Marianne came by with that notary woman again. Wanted me to sign something. I refused. She got angry. That's when I understood. Marianne had been trying to change the will for months, and when Grandma refused, she decided to forge it after she died. On Saturday, the country club hosted its annual charity gala. Marianne was on the planning committee. She'd talked about it for months before Grandma died, back when she still pretended to care about me. I put on my one nice dress, borrowed makeup from Rosie, and bought a ticket with tip money I'd been saving. The venue was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, servers in tuxedos carrying champagne. Marianne stood near the silent auction table, laughing with women who wore more jewellery than I'd earned in 5 years. I approached slowly. Her smile froze when she saw me. Emily, what a surprise. Hi, Aunt Marianne, you look beautiful. The compliment tasted like poison. She recovered quickly, turning to her friends. Everyone, this is my niece. She helped take care of my mother before she passed. Sympathy flooded their faces. One woman touched my arm. You poor thing. It must have been so hard. It was, I said, looking directly at Marianne. But Grandma made sure I'd be taken care of. She was very specific about that in her will. Marianne's smile tightened. Yes, well, we're still sorting through all the legal details. I'm sure we'll have it sorted out soon, I said sweetly. My lawyer is very thorough. Her eyes flashed. Your lawyer? Thomas Bradley. He's been so helpful. The colour drained from her face. Marianne grabbed my arm and pulled me away from her friends. What do you think you're doing? I kept my voice innocent. Having a conversation. Is something wrong? You hired a lawyer. Grandma left me his card. Told me to call him after she died. Her grip tightened. Emily, you need to drop whatever you're planning. You're making a mistake. The only mistake was thinking you cared about me. I pulled my arm free. I know about the forgery, Marianne. I know you faked Grandma's signature on the deed transfer. Her expression shifted from anger to something colder, calculating. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. Grandma kept very detailed records, about everything. For just a moment, fear flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by that perfect smile. I don't know what you think you found, but you're confused. Grief can do that. Why don't you let me help you? I don't need your help. You're living above a laundromat, working for tips. You need someone to take care of you. Like you took care of Grandma. The words came out sharper than I intended. Her smile vanished completely. Careful, Emily. You're not in a position to make accusations. Neither are you. I walked away before she could respond. My hands shook, but my voice had been steady. Behind me, I heard her making excuses to her friends, some story about my grief making me confused and emotional. But I'd planted the seed. Now everyone knew there was a dispute. That would matter later. 2 days later, Marianne called. "Emily, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't you come by the house? We should talk." Everything in me screamed that this was a trap, but I needed to get her on record. "Okay, when?" "Tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. I called Mr. Bradley immediately. He listened to my plan and sighed. "Emily, if you're going to do this, you need to be smart. Record everything. Don't let her know you're recording, and don't take anything that belongs to her." "I won't. I just want the truth." The truth is dangerous when someone has as much to lose as she does. "Be careful." I showed up at exactly 2 o'clock. Marianne answered the door wearing casual clothes, her smile warm and false. "Come in, sweetie. I made tea." The house felt different now. Empty. Like Grandma's absence had created a vacuum that nothing could fill. We sat in the living room, the same place where Grandma and I used to watch old movies. My phone was in my pocket, recording app already running. Marianne poured tea like we were friends. "I want to apologize for the gala. I was stressed and I took it out on you." "It's fine," I lied. "I know you're under a lot of pressure." "Exactly. Settling an estate is complicated. There's so much paperwork, so many legal issues." She sipped her tea. "That's why I wanted to talk to you about the lake house." "What about it?" I kept my voice neutral. Marianne leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. "Emily, I know your grandmother told you things before she died. She was very sick at the end. Sometimes people say things they don't mean." She seemed pretty clear to me. "But was she? Really?" Marianne set down her cup. "The truth is, Mum changed her mind about a lot of things in those final weeks. She was scared, confused. She didn't want to burden you with property you couldn't afford to maintain." "That's not what she told me." "Because she didn't want to hurt your feelings." Her voice softened, like she was explaining something simple to a child. "The lake house costs thousands in property taxes every year. There's maintenance, insurance, utilities. You're 19 years old, working at a diner. You can't handle that kind of responsibility." Maybe not, but it was still mine to decide. Was it, though? She smiled. "Emily, I hate to say this, but you need to be realistic. That property was always meant to stay in the family. Real family." The implication hung in the air like smoke. I wasn't real family, just the orphaned niece who'd been kept around out of obligation. "Grandma thought I was real family," I said quietly. "Of course she did, and we all love you. But love and legal reality are different things." She reached across and patted my hand. "The house is mine now, Emily. Mum signed the papers before she died." "You mean the papers you forged?" The words came out before I could stop them. Marianne's expression didn't change, but her hand withdrew. "Excuse me?" "The signature on the deed transfer, it's not Grandma's." "You're upset. I understand, but you need to be very careful about the accusations you make." "I have proof." "What proof?" Her voice sharpened. "Some journal entries? Some confused letters from a dying woman? That won't hold up in court." "Won't it?" I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. "What about this conversation, where you just admitted that you took the house because you think I can't handle it, where you called me not real family?" Her face went pale, then flushed red. "You recorded me?" "Every word." "That's illegal." "Actually, Michigan is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, it's perfectly legal." I checked. I stood up. "I'm giving you one chance, Marianne. Drop the deed transfer. Admit what you did, and maybe I won't press charges for forgery and fraud." She stood too, her hands shaking with rage. "You ungrateful little—" "Choose your next words carefully. I'm still recording." For a long moment we just stared at each other. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "You think you've won? You think some recording and a dead woman's journal are enough? I think a judge will be very interested in both. Get out of my house." "Gladly." I walked to the door, then paused. "By the way, I also know about the notary, Patricia Holmes. She's been very cooperative with my lawyer." That was a lie. I hadn't contacted the notary yet, but I watched Marianne's face crumble, and I knew I'd hit something real. "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I?" I shrugged. "I guess we'll find out in court." I left before she could respond. My whole body was shaking, adrenaline flooding my system, but I'd done it. I'd gotten her on record. That night, Mr. Bradley listened to the recording 3 times. "This is good, Emily, very good. Combined with the journal and the handwriting analysis, we have a solid case." "What happens now?" "Now we file a formal challenge to the deed transfer. We'll request a hearing, present our evidence, and let the judge decide." "How long will that take?" "Could be a few weeks, could be a few months. Courts move slowly." I nodded, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. "Thank you for believing me." "Your grandmother made me promise to look after you. She knew this would happen." He closed his laptop. "Emily, you need to prepare yourself. Marianne won't go down without a fight. She'll try to discredit you, paint you as a bitter, confused kid who's lashing out in grief. Let her try. I'm serious, this will get ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. "But I'm not backing down. Grandma trusted me with this. I'm not letting her down." Mr. Bradley smiled. "She'd be very proud of you." I hoped he was right, because right then, sitting in that law office with everything I owned in a backpack, I didn't feel strong. I felt terrified. The court date arrived 6 weeks later. I wore the same dress from the gala, cleaned and pressed. Mr. Bradley wore a sharp suit and carried 3 folders of evidence. Marianne arrived with her lawyer, a man named Douglas Pierce, who looked like he charged more per hour than I made in a month. She wore white, perfectly tailored, expensive white, like she was the victim. The judge was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She reviewed the case file while we sat in silence. "Miss Pierce, you're challenging the deed transfer on grounds of forgery." Mr. Bradley stood. "Yes, Your Honour. We have substantial evidence that the signature on the transfer document is not authentic, and you and Mr. Pierce are defending the transfer as legitimate." Douglas Pierce stood. "Yes, Your Honour. Mrs. Kendall acted in accordance with her mother's final wishes, properly documented and notarized. Let's see the evidence." For the next hour, Mr. Bradley presented everything. The handwriting analysis showing the signature differences, the journal entries proving Grandma's intent, the bank statements showing Marianne's financial dependence, the recording of our conversation. Marianne's face grew redder with each piece of evidence. Pierce tried to object, tried to dismiss it as circumstantial, but the judge shut him down. "I'll hear what he has to say, Counselor." Finally, Mr. Bradley played the recording. My voice and Marianne's filled the courtroom. When she said real family, several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. When the recording ended, Judge Martinez looked at Marianne. "Mrs. Kendall, do you deny that this is your voice?" Marianne glanced at Pierce, who nodded slightly. That conversation was taken out of context. I was trying to help Emily understand, help her understand that she's not real family. The judge's tone was ice. "Your Honour, my client was under duress. The girl ambushed her." "The girl has a name," Judge Martinez interrupted. "And from what I can see, Miss Watkins has been remarkably composed throughout this process." She turned to me. "Miss Watkins, do you have anything to add?" I stood, my legs shaking. "Just that my grandmother spent her final months making sure I'd be protected. She knew her daughter would try to take what she'd left me. And she was right." My voice cracked. "I loved my grandmother. I gave up everything to take care of her. I'm not trying to steal anything, I'm just trying to keep what she wanted me to have." The judge nodded. "Sit down, please." She reviewed the documents one more time, then looked up. "I'm going to rule from the bench. The evidence presented today shows clear and convincing proof that the signature on the deed transfer document is fraudulent. Furthermore, the journal entries and financial records establish a pattern of financial manipulation and undue influence. Pierce jumped up. Your Honour, we request time to— Sit down, counsellor. I'm not finished. She turned to Marianne. Mrs. Kendall, you forged your mother's signature on a legal document to steal property that was left to your niece. That's fraud. That's theft. The deed transfer is hereby voided. The property at 847 Clearwater Drive is restored to Emily Watkins as the sole beneficiary of Helen Watkins's estate. The gavel hit the bench with a sharp crack. Marianne's face went white. Pierce whispered something urgent in her ear, but she just shook her head, staring at me like I was a stranger. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued, I'm ordering a full investigation into the notarization of these documents. If Miss Holmes participated in this fraud, she'll face criminal charges. Pierce stood again. Your Honour, my client, your client, committed forgery. I suggest she retain a criminal defence attorney because I'm forwarding this case to the prosecutor's office. The courtroom erupted. People in the gallery started whispering. A reporter in the back row was typing frantically on her phone. Mr. Bradley touched my arm. Emily, we won. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. Marianne stood abruptly and walked out without looking back. Uncle Frank followed her, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For the first time since Grandma died, I felt like I could breathe. Outside the courthouse, Mr. Bradley shook my hand. The property is yours. I'll file the paperwork today. You should have full legal ownership within a week. Thank you for everything. Thank your grandmother. She set all this up. I just followed her instructions. He smiled. What will you do now? I don't know. Get the keys, I guess. See the house. It needs some work, but it's beautiful. Your grandmother loved it there. The drive to Clearwater Lake took 2 hours. The house sat at the end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by pine trees and silence. It was smaller than I'd imagined. A cabin, really. Wood siding weathered to grey, a stone chimney, windows that looked out over the water. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, everything was dusty and still. Furniture covered with white sheets, an old stone fireplace, bookshelves filled with titles I recognized from Grandma's favourites. I walked through slowly, touching everything. This was mine, really mine. In the bedroom, I found more of Grandma's things. Photo albums I'd never seen, a quilt she'd made when my mum was born, a letter addressed to me, propped against the pillow. I opened it with shaking hands. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, you've won. I knew you would. You're stronger than Marianne ever gave you credit for. Stronger than I gave you credit for, truthfully. This house is my gift to you. Not because you deserve it for taking care of me, though you do, but because you deserve a place that's yours. A place where you can build a life without anyone telling you what to do or who to be. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from Marianne's cruelty. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to confront her while I was alive, but I made sure you'd have what you needed to fight back. Use this house wisely. Fill it with love. And remember that you were the best part of my final years. Love always, Grandma. I sat on the porch as the sun set over the lake, Grandma's letter still in my hands. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the orange and pink sky. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called out. This was peace. Real peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something worth fighting for. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You ruined my life. Marianne. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back. No, you did that when you forged Grandma's signature. Then I blocked the number. Whatever happened to her now wasn't my concern. The next day, Mr. Bradley called. The prosecutor is moving forward with fraud charges. Patricia Holmes is cooperating in exchange for a lesser sentence. She's admitting that Marianne paid her to notarize the forged signature. What does that mean? It means Marianne is facing serious criminal charges. She could get up to 5 years in prison. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, no joy, just emptiness where anger used to be. Emily, are you okay? I'm fine, I said. I just want this to be over. It will be, soon. But he was wrong. The story spread fast. Local news picked it up. Woman forges mother's will to steal from niece. Then regional news. Then a true crime podcast. Everyone wanted to interview me. I declined them all. This wasn't about fame or validation. It was about justice, and I'd already gotten that. 3 months later, Marianne pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery. She got 2 years in prison and 5 years probation. Her husband divorced her. The country club revoked her membership. Her friends disappeared. She lost everything that mattered to her. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that she'd chosen money over family. Sad that Grandma had spent her final years knowing her daughter was capable of this. But I also felt free. Free from the guilt of feeling like I owed her something. Free from the fear that she'd find a way to take the house from me. Free to finally grieve Grandma without anger clouding everything. I spent those months fixing up the cabin. I repainted the walls a soft cream colour, fixed the dock, planted flowers by the porch, the same kind Grandma used to grow. Each project felt like reclaiming a part of myself that Marianne had tried to erase. I enrolled in online classes, starting the college degree I'd postponed. Business management. Maybe someday I'd do something with this property, turn it into a retreat centre for caregivers who needed a break, or just keep it as a quiet place where people could heal. One afternoon, Uncle Frank showed up. I hadn't seen him since the trial. He looked older, tired. Emily, can we talk? We sat on the porch. He didn't say anything for a long time. I'm sorry, he finally said. I should have stood up to her, should have helped you. I was a coward. Yes, you were, I agreed. There was no point in lying. He nodded, accepting it. Marianne and I are divorced. She blames me for not protecting her better. I blame myself for not protecting you. I don't need protection anymore. I can see that. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. This is from me, not from her, just me. It's not much, but it's what I can afford. Inside was a check for $5,000. I tried to hand it back. I don't want your money. It's not about what you want. It's about what I owe. Please, let me do this one decent thing. I looked at the check, then at him. The guilt in his eyes was real. So was the regret. Okay, I said quietly. Thank you. He stood to leave, then paused. Your grandmother would be proud of you, the way you fought for yourself, the way you didn't let Marianne break you. She always said you were stronger than you looked. After he left, I deposited the check and used it to finish the renovations. New windows that actually sealed properly. A new roof that wouldn't leak. Small things that made the house feel permanent. 6 months after the trial, I hosted my first dinner at the lake house. Not family, I didn't have much of that left. But Rosie from the diner came, Mr. Bradley and his wife, a few people from my online classes who'd become friends. We ate on the porch as the sun set, laughing and talking about nothing important. And I realised something. This was what Grandma had wanted for me. Not revenge, not bitterness, just peace, just a life that was mine. That night, after everyone left, I walked down to the dock and sat with my feet in the water. The lake was dark and still, reflecting 1,000 stars. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the fight, the victory. And I understood that it had never been about the house. Not really. It was about knowing my worth, about refusing to let someone else define what I deserved, about fighting for what was right, even when it was hard. Marianne had called me a parasite, worthless, not real family. She'd throw me out in the rain like I was nothing. But I wasn't nothing. I was Grandma's granddaughter. I was a fighter. I was someone who could lose everything and still find a way to stand back up. The house was just wood and stone. What mattered was what it represented, proof that love was stronger than greed, That truth was stronger than lies, that sometimes the people who underestimate you are the ones who end up losing everything. Moi. I didn't take revenge on Marianne. The courts did that. Her own choices did that. I simply took what was legally mine. What Grandma had wanted me to have. What I'd earned by being there when it mattered most. And as I sat there in the darkness, listening to the water lap against the dock, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in years. Home. Not the building, not the property, but the feeling of belonging somewhere, of having a place in the world that no one could take away. Grandma had given me that, not just with the house, but with her belief in me, with her careful planning, with her understanding that sometimes love means preparing someone to fight their own battles. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last photo I had of us together. She was in her chair by the window, smiling despite the pain. I was beside her, young and exhausted, but trying to smile too. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered to the stars. "We won." The water rippled in the breeze, carrying my words out across the lake, and somewhere I liked to think she heard me. Because this wasn't just my victory. It was hers too. She'd spent her final months building a fortress around me, brick by brick, document by document. She'd known exactly what her daughter would do, and she'd made sure I had everything I needed to survive it. That was love. Real love. Not the kind that demanded gratitude or expected repayment, but the kind that prepared you for the worst and trusted you to handle it. I stood up and walked back to the house. My house. Through the windows, I could see the warm glow of the lamps I'd left on, the furniture I'd uncovered and cleaned, the life I was building. Tomorrow I'd wake up and continue my classes. I'd work on the garden. Maybe I'd drive into town and have coffee with Rosie. Small, normal things that added up to a life worth living. But tonight I just wanted to sit in Grandma's chair and feel her presence in this place she'd loved, to say thank you in the silence, to promise her that I'd take care of what she'd given me. Not just the property, but the lesson, that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something beautiful from the ashes of their cruelty. It's proving them wrong by living well. It's taking what's legally yours and making it into something they could never have, a home filled with peace instead of poison. Marianne had lost everything, her freedom, her reputation, her family, her friends, all because she couldn't let go of greed long enough to see what actually mattered. But I'd gained everything, not because I was cruel or vengeful, but because I refused to let her win. Because I stood up for myself when no one else would. Because I honoured Grandma's memory by fighting for what she'd wanted me to have. As I settled into the chair with Grandma's quilt wrapped around me, I felt something release in my chest. The anger I'd been carrying for months, maybe years, the bitterness, the fear. It all just let go. What remained was simple and true. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I'd fought the battle I needed to fight, and I'd won not just in court, but in the way that mattered most. I'd kept my soul intact. I'd honoured the woman who loved me, and I'd built a future that was entirely mine. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar and safe. Outside, the lake whispered against the shore, and inside I finally felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd learned the most important lesson, that your worth isn't determined by who claims you or who throws you away. It's determined by how you fight for yourself when everyone else has given up on you. And I had fought. With every piece of evidence, every legal filing, every moment I refused to back down. I'd taken what was legally mine, not out of greed, but out of love. Love for Grandma, love for the truth, and finally, love for myself. That was enough. That would always be enough.